Hello and welcome to the Tech Remedy podcast. I'm Jamie and I'm passionate about seeing businesses win using technology. In each episode, we'll talk to industry experts or business owners just like you. We'll uncover how technology is being used in the real world. Don't forget to subscribe and follow me on LinkedIn for more insight and content to come. Simon, welcome to the Tech Remedy podcast.
Oh, thanks for having us, Jamie.
Nice to meet you. I'm excited about this. We've obviously partnered together recently on a few projects.
Yes.
So it should be a good episode.
I hope so.
For obviously people that don't know you, I'll just read a quick bio. So Simon is the founder of iThink 365 and a leader in the SharePoint world since 2006. With extensive experience in Microsoft 365 and Azure, Simon has delivered tailored solutions for major clients like Barclays, Old Mutual, and Porter Cabin. And more recently, you've been recognized as a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional, an MVP, which obviously a massive award. And then in 2011, you've founded iThink 365, where you've built a culture of collaboration, creativity, and customer focus. The company has grown into a trusted provider of Microsoft solutions, using elements like the Power Platform to build solutions and solve business problems.
Yeah, well, yeah.
It's always cringy hearing bits about yourself, I think, isn't it? So, just to start and follow on that flow, can you tell me a bit about iThink 365?
Yeah. So iThink 365, we are sort of specialists in Microsoft 365. Some people say experts. We're not. We just we enjoy helping businesses get more value from Microsoft 365. We're a little bit different, I think, in traditional kind of MSPs. We are more interested in kind of business process development, but just helping businesses be successful through their people. We're very people-centric, their process, take advantage of things like AI, which we'll get to in the Power Platform as well. So the business itself has been around for quite a while, but really it was 2019. That's kind of when iThink 365 came about, because I went from being a contractor to being, I'm actually going to get a business coach and start building the business. So,
so that's kind of as you are now. That's
right.
When you founded, essentially. Okay, so you mentioned about, I think people is a good point there, that nowadays modern businesses and people and culture is so important.
Yes.
And I know you've developed some apps of your own, which we might cover a bit later, that lend itself to people and culture. But can you start by telling me a bit more about maybe how people underutilize Microsoft 365 and some of the things you see? Yeah,
sure. So, I mean, most people, when they think about Microsoft 365, probably think about email being the primary thing, and then the Office clients like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. But it's got so much more. Yes, with the pandemic, we had that influx of Microsoft Teams and people using that and remote working. But again, that was generally being used for meetings and using video there. But the Microsoft Teams platform is incredible what you can do there. You can really bring it in all sorts, your business processes in there. You can bring document management. It's not just a place to meet. You can drive projects. You can drive department initiatives. And so that's really where we come in. We'll help educate and show people what's the art of the possible with the Microsoft 365 platform. And for me as a business owner, a lot of learning is, as I've learned more about business and what's important to kind of, in terms of metrics, is how you can then leverage things like Power BI, which we'll talk about more, to give you a way of really understanding the numbers in the business and make sure that the business is going in the right direction, as being successful, profitable, and that's where the value, I think, in. I am a developer. I love shiny objects, but it's how can we turn that into something which is really useful for a business. For the business.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Starting with the Teams element, before COVID, when it used to auto start, the number of requests we had, can you stop this from starting? And we don't use it, and then weren't interested. And then, like you said, COVID, remote working, it became a video tool like Zoom.
Yeah.
And then since then, the evolution of what it can do and what it can deliver is massive. But we still have people we speak to that just use it for the main video or a bit of instant messaging and not really any of the stuff above. And I think one of the things that we love about it is once you've got familiar with the skin of Teams and you put in these different apps and functionality into it, you're not deploying new software all the time for people to learn. I know it technically fits within the window, but it feels familiar. It feels like it's kind of something you've used forever once you've got used to using it. So you mentioned a little bit of Power BI, and I think again it's important to recognize that if you've got a foot in both worlds now, you're a techie or a kind of got a technical background, but now you also have that business element, you're perfectly placed to see an opportunity and marry up a technology to fix a business problem, which I'm not sure all companies necessarily do. And traditional IT companies, I think, tend to just stay on the more break fix or proactive techie side of stuff. So can you dig into a little bit more about Power BI? And I know there's Power Apps and Power Automate as well. And give us some examples of kind of what they do and how you might have been using them.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So should we sort of cover the Power Platform just in general, just so that everyone sort of is aware?
That would probably be a good start.
So, the Power Platform is part of the Microsoft 365 sort of suite. There are a number of different products which make it. Power Automate is the first one, and that's really the glue which is connecting systems together. It works with the other parts of the Power Platform, but it is the workflow element of it. You've got Power Apps, what's nice about it is you've got a desktop version, but you've also got a mobile version too, and it's the user interface. It's what you can use to interact with build your application in that. You've got two types of application that you can build in Power Apps. You've got something called a Canvas app, which is very sort of flexible in the way that you can design, which has some advantages. It has some disadvantages because of that flexibility. But if you've got Microsoft 365 with Business Standard, for example, then you've got access to the Canvas apps. There's another one called model-driven apps, and the difference there is that it's less configurable in the user interface, but you're designing your application through its data structures. So, maybe customer and customer address and order and that sort of thing. But it means it's very rapid to develop, and it's actually what Dynamics 365 is built on the same platform. And you have got, again, workflow and things in there, and it works with all the other elements of Power
So
Platform.
its scalability is greater for those sort of apps?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it uses something called Dataverse, and if you just think of Dataverse like a SQL Server database, which is managed by Microsoft, and it's got some really nice enterprise features in there. So that's the Power Apps. You've then got Power BI, which is around reporting, management dashboards, visualization. Power BI can access almost any data source. It can access data within your network if you've got that traditional kind of hybrid where you've got some on-prem network systems and cloud systems. It can access those too. So very, very versatile, very flexible, and it can also then be used by the other parts of the Power Platform. So you can embed Power Apps in Power BI, you can embed Power BI in your model-driven apps. So you've got that. It's got Power BI. Then you've got Power Pages, which is a web version of Power Apps. Really, it's again very similar to model-driven apps in that it's built on the Dataverse platform, but it's used for external websites. So if you live in the West Yorkshire area, you'll be using it if you've had a look at any of the sort of combined authority DE3 grants and things like that.
So they're already using them.
They're built on that. There are some add-ons then as well. One of them is called AI Builder. So that is allowing you to use AI functionality within the Power Platform. But those are kind of the core. And then the last one, which I mustn't forget about, used to be called Power Virtual Agents. It's now called Copilot Studio. And it's around building chatbot interfaces, leveraging OpenAI, GPT. And that's really, really taking off at the moment, obviously, with all the generative AI functionality. And we talked about it, didn't we, a few weeks ago?
We've hopefully got an exciting project coming up, haven't we? Which will utilise that, definitely. Okay, so I guess just to step back then a second. So I'm a business owner. I'm using Microsoft already. I don't quite know of some of these elements. What we're saying is you have some Power Automate and some Power app
Yep.
functionality already built in that you're just not
Yep.
utilizing.
That's right.
What would be a good way that we could get started? Or if you're a business owner and you want to understand the power and
Yeah, of
the
course.
functionality you could reach, what would be an easy way to get started or to look at that sort of stuff?
So for me, I'd probably start with Power Automate and using Power Automate to glue things together. So, a common one we get is, you might have, maybe say you've got a website. You've got a website, you've got a contact form. It fills some information out. It sends it, maybe it emails it to you. You could then have Power Automate trigger when that email arrives, take that information and put it into your CRM, into another system. So gluing systems together, and we see that often.
So that can remove the tedious tasks in day-to-day
exactly
lives and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's right. Other things you can do as well. So we'll introduce something called SharePoint. So SharePoint, really just think about document management. You have these things called document libraries, which store documents. Documents have columns, metadata, which describes information. So let's take an invoice, right? So we might have a process where somebody emails an invoice into you, to accounts payable. Power Automate takes that invoice, pops it into SharePoint. Another Power Automate runs, and it does some discovery on the invoice, and it looks up like the supplier name, the invoice total, automates, extracts all that information out, and then populates the columns in that SharePoint document library. And then you could then go and send that into Xero or some other system. So it's gluing those things together.
So if people have used tools like Zapier in the past, it's a Microsoft alternative that you're already getting included as part of your subscription that you're probably just not aware of or utilizing.
That's right. There's one thing I will have to just sort of say. There are two flavors of what they call connectors. So everything which the Power Platform how it connects to systems is using a connector. You get a standard connector which you're licensed to use, and generally that's anything in the Microsoft 365 world. So any of those Microsoft 365 services, you'll be able to use a standard connector. If you want to connect to other third-party systems, that's then when you have a premium connector and you need to have premium licenses. And the licensing is always, it's never simple with Microsoft.
No.
But you have premium licenses for Power Apps, which is at a user level. Power Automate is at a flow level. So each workflow that you've got, you're licensing at that level rather than for every user that's using that Power Automate. So there's a difference there. Yeah,
but I assume if you can equate the return in time you're saving, it's easier to quantify the
absolutely
worthwhile.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, because that's one of the most important things is, right, before you start entertaining is looking at, right, what's going to give us a good return, put some measurements in place. So A, you can see if you did get that return, and B, when you do get the return, you can kind of go, look, we did this, we saved this amount of time, we've done this. So we're sort of seeing a lot with email where people are looking at using Power Automate with AI to be able to categorize and triage email and reduce the amount of time and the amount of effort that's going on to do that triage and automatically routing it to the right teams. And the one thing they can start doing is start measuring how long did it take us to respond to that email, so we can sort of tag that email, and then when it gets sent back out again, we can pick up and say, oh, it took this amount of time, and you've then got a way of measuring your productivity gains there. So
that it sort of lends itself to the last episode when we talked about customer experience as well, and how you could deliver a better experience for your clients or your customers by making those like email communications quicker and that kind of stuff. So
yes, that's right.
That makes sense. And I think I'm right in saying that it's designed to be what they call low code or no code. Yes. I know actually it can be more complex than that, but in theory, you can go out and create something without having a big technical understanding.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. The most, as anything, when we're building things, first and most important point is to start thinking about how the thing you're going to build is going to work. So, don't start coding something or building something. Just sit down, get a bit of paper, draw out what it is you're going to look to build, how it's going to work, what's the business process that you might be following, and then start to build. So the beauty of low code is anybody can kind of pick it up. there is some challenges as you start building those things
Yeah.
through, and we can talk about some of the things which you should do and think about before starting your Power Platform journey. But yeah.
Perfect. So can we then cover briefly Power Apps? Because I know that's a big one that we're starting to use more. And this is one of
Yes.
the reasons we partner with you guys and we work together on stuff for clients. And I think they deliver kind of more slick
Yes.
benefits than a Power Flow that you necessarily can't always see but would deliver a
that's
benefit.
right.
A Power App is something that clients can touch, something your staff can use and you can physically see.
Yeah.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the benefits or maybe
Yeah,
some
yeah.
projects you've had?
Yeah, so I mean, what's great about the Power Automate bit is that it can, it can, provided you've got the information,
Yeah.
it can, work with that. But often you need to have that information, so that's where Power Apps comes in. Like I mentioned before, you can have it on a mobile phone, which is fantastic. So, if you're in the construction industry or you're working out of the office, you're in the field, then you can build an app. Maybe you're looking after maintenance of a wind farm, which is some of the things we've seen where you're maintaining these wind turbines. You're being able to track what parts need to be changed, putting those in while you're suspended up in there on your Power App, So, so some of the things you can do with Power Apps, anything where you need to enter data. So, timesheet apps, tracking the time you're spending, expenses apps, holiday leave requests. We've built all sorts. We've built a platform for a fiber network installer, so they could track the build of fiber networks and tracking all the builds and of all the nodes and the reporting back on there. We've built stuff for managing maintenance work jobs. We've done stuff around managing publications. So if you're a marketing organization, you might be pushing content out, or there might be books which are being created or white papers, and using those, using that to manage the process where people can submit their white paper through to the marketing department and take it through a publishing process.
Yeah.
I mean,
so it can all be a branded UI, and you can really kind of push people down the path you need them to enter the data you need to collect. And that
yes, that's right. Yeah, so it's absolutely very customizable. It work the way that you want it to work, rather than the way that the system might be designed that forces you down a particular route. And that is where kind of, spending a bit of time understanding the elements of design so you can help make it easier for people to use. But absolutely, you can build something quickly and very custom, and just capturing the different types of information. It could, it might be dates, text, photos. It could be all sorts in there. Yeah.
And you'd say that was a higher, you need a little bit more knowledge to be able to get started with a Power App versus a Power Flow and
Power Automate. Yes, I would say so. Because I think the Power Automate, as you said, is a low code platform, and it looks, it's all very visual. So you sort of drag and drop elements onto the page. You kind of hook things up, and I think sort of our minds are quite tuned to looking at flow charts and diagrams, and so you can build those things up quite quickly. It's incredible what you can do.
That makes a lot of sense, and obviously we've seen a real positive reaction from the clients so far with the apps we've developed. Obviously we're in the process similar to iThink in that people and culture are important to us here, and we're trying to develop, as like a suite of apps that can be used. So I know the next app we're looking at with you guys is all around customer satisfaction and rewarding employees, and kind of being able to give each other kudos and just celebrate kind of thing. So I think it's important that people that want to get into Power Apps can understand that there can be internal benefit as well as making things for their client base as well. It doesn't have to be something that touches external.
No, that's very true.
But I think you might think this is the wrong sentiment or statement, but if you can think it, you can make it in Power Apps, would be something I would sort of say. I don't know if it does have any limitations that would stop you.
I mean, we do get people sort of requesting things which, it would be difficult for any computer to do. So I think, it has to be, I mean, AI has made a big change and shifted that, thinking a bit. And, computers obviously can do a huge amount, and AI has helped make that even more. But yeah, if you're thinking about the Power Apps, it does have some limitations with just sort of when we talk about the limitations at the standard connector level. So often people will use SharePoint as a data store, and there's some limitations around there. Finding information, once it gets over to 2,000 pieces of information, then that can be, there's limitations there. But if it's capturing information and processing that, then Power Apps is a great way of doing that. And the Kudos one, I mean, often if you're using an Excel spreadsheet, that is a brilliant thing to look at and go, well, actually, this Excel spreadsheet, we can do that, but there's some limitations with Excel. Switching that into a Power App and then driving the process with Power Automate is a great pattern for sort of transforming business.
Yeah, I think we see a lot of Excel used beyond probably what it was designed for. Like it's capable of doing it, but it's not necessarily. I think it's outgrown its original purpose.
Yes,
and I think people are just so comfortable using it and because they don't know about Power Apps, they're stuck with these things that don't quite fulfill the needs when there's a better system.
And they might go and do some really interesting things to that spreadsheet to make it work for them, but then that also causes them problems as well. And it might be that to actually use the Excel spreadsheet, you need a load of training, and that's people really need to understand how to make it work. Whereas with a Power App, you can sort of make it a nice journey and easy to pick up and use, making it more usable. So that has a big advantage, especially as your business scales and you don't have to worry about trying to do so much with training.
That makes sense. So I think that probably is a natural progression into then a point that I sometimes speak to clients about, where they've the business has grown and matured, where they've had these different mini apps, maybe an Excel sheet that's grown past its original intended purpose, or they've started and they've bought one system and then they've had to buy another system because it didn't quite meet all the requirements. And then what happens is they end up with 5, 10, 15 different systems, and the data all in these individual systems is quite siloed. And I think what we're saying and what you touched on earlier with data versus, it would store it centrally and you'd have one data set to manage. But then you could maximize your use of things like Power Automate.
Exactly. Power that's right.
Apps, and especially then things like Power BI, which would give you that reporting metric, and those KPIs and anything you want to pull out and visualize. Yeah,
that's right. So the classic one would be to think about all the customer touch points you might have. So you might have your sales team, your marketing team, interacting with your customers, but then also you might have your support teams and your field service teams also doing that. Now, if you've got that information in different silos, then the salesperson goes into a meeting and goes, how's everything going? And then they get shouted out by your customer because there's been all these problems with support, and and they're not aware of that. So if we can bring that all into one model and allow that salesperson to go and actually go, right, I see we've got this problem here, this is what we've done to resolve that, you're going to give a much better customer experience. So it's often that silo of information is a real pain for people, particularly if you want to start copying information out of one system into another system. You get people copying it incorrectly or adding things or missing things. That when you start introducing human error, then that then can also then go out to your customer or to your employees, and that doesn't give a great experience for either. So
and then I'm kind of right in my thinking that applying an AI across a dataverse would have a greater impact than trying to apply it to a system where you've got siloed data, because it would only see certain elements of that, so the outcomes would be less complex.
That's right. So you might say to the AI, tell me about this, what do I need to be aware of before I go and meet this customer? And you ask the AI to give you a summary of that. Well, it knows, or it can work out what the relationships are with the data in that one application database. But if they're siloed, it has no idea about the other things. And then you would have to develop that to get that information. And costs more money. And
Yeah.
so no, you're absolutely right. Bringing it all into one. There's also other things you can as well. When you've got that one data set together, you can then expose that through other different ways. You're interacting. You're not taking a copy of that data. You're making that visible to your customers. So if you imagine you've got Power Apps is driving your internal business processes. You might have Power Pages where you've got that external client website.
Yeah.
It's also talking to the same information, restricted so they can only see what they need to be able to see. But then you can start linking the two together, and it might be that, you're starting a new project, you need to issue contracts out. Well, that starts off internally, but it goes into a client portal, and then the client gets an email. They get taken into their client portal. And just think about all the opportunities you've got to kind of continue educating the customer on what you can do. Maybe there's marketing opportunities. Maybe you do webinars. Maybe you do, other services and products which you can start, sort of letting them know about. So it kind of has that in their back of their minds. And it makes them a stickier customer as well, which
so it unlocks all that potential that you can continuously keep working on and
that's right,
incrementally improving.
And you can start increasing your average spend per customer and driving your turnover and profit that way. So
it's super interesting. I think if you were to start a business today, you would just pick one system. And you would just work in one system on one data set. But I think the problem most businesses have, they started X many years ago, and you don't know what you need until you get started, and you buy a module and buy an add-on and buy a different app and things like that, don't you?
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing actually. I was listening to a podcast just today. It's called .NET Rocks, and they were talking about design thinking. We've got a lot of organizations which may have built some applications 10, 15, 20 years ago, and the people who know and understand those applications, they might be coming up for retirement, and so suddenly you've got people with all this domain knowledge and they're leaving, and that really can impact the business if those people leave, and so looking at making those systems less complicated and building them on the Power Platform is a great way to be able to bring that knowledge back in, make it simpler for people to work with your business and then drive your business forward. So
that makes us good sense. So probably on that as well then, AI.
Yes.
We touched on it a little bit. Copilot is obviously the big Microsoft AI.
Yes.
Where do you see it being in the future? How does it fit? I know we touched a little bit on it, but what should we be doing?
Yeah. So first of all, what is Copilot? So Copilot is Microsoft's sort of flavor of OpenAI's GPT models. So it's a support system really for you as an individual. So it's a personal productivity tool at the moment. That's where it's kind of pitched. So you've got Copilots in Excel and Word, and then they allow you to do more greater things. Where that's moving to, though, is these custom copilots where they are more geared up to helping you achieve things. There's this term, the agent. So copilot agents, which then support you. So where do I see the stuff going? At the moment, AI is incredible what you can do. And the thing that I do try and use a lot is within meetings. We have, as you do, we've got custom meetings. Everyone's chatting about what they want and keeping track of those meeting minutes and the action points. And if you're writing down, you're missing what conversation's going on. Well, Copilot can record that and then give you a summary of the meeting minutes, the action points. That's fantastic. But Copilot is able then to help people just get more from the platform, because it knows how Word works, how Excel works, how PowerPoint works, and so it's able to really level up your skill set without you really knowing how to do those things. So I think that is Copilot is a real leveler. But where do I see it going? Well, the thing I want, and we're looking at this, is I'd like to be able to have sort of junior members of my team supported by a Copilot helping them. So maybe we're in that requirements workshop where we're trying to understand what the customer wants, and the junior member of the team can ask the Copilot in the meeting, mention the agent. What questions have I not asked? So imagine you're I don't know, you're in construction, you're a junior quantity surveyor, what questions should I ask to make sure that I've got everything, and having that support tool and network, that's where I see these things going. These agents, if you could imagine, you could start having numerous agents which are very good at particular tasks, and then you become the orchestrator of these agents. So maybe you're in marketing and you want to go out and go and find me 20 new things that Microsoft 365 can do, or 20 new customers who are in this sector. And you launch your agents, they go off and go and find and search databases and the website and bring all that stuff back. That is where I see things really working. So you're orchestrating those and they're working.
And you're empowering people all the time, going back to that culture piece. And so I guess you think they're like kind of just mini specialists that work within your team.
Yeah, that's right.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think there's a big fear, isn't there, around AI replacing people, but the mentality we have and that we want is just empower people using it. That makes sense.
Make them better. Yeah, and then the other one just to say is knowledge co-pilots. So these are allowing people to ask questions, disseminate a lot of information. Maybe you're in finance, insurance. You've got these 300, 400 policy documents, and you're looking for that answer to that particular question, and you can start using AI to allow you to find that information. That's the big one.
I did see a demo. It wasn't a UK-based company, but for a legal practice.
Yeah.
And it allowed basically clients to ask questions about the cases and what the legal documents meant without having to speak to a paralegal or a solicitor.
Yeah.
Obviously, you probably have to caveat that and say be careful in the legal realms, but at least give them a little bit of insight into what a legal document actually meant, rather than just reading it word for word, which can be, I guess, complex and overwhelming.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of the language used.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right, perfect. That I think has been really good. So just before we wrap up, 2 quick ones. If people are really interested in Power Apps, which I think they should be, and getting more out of the Power Cloud, how can they speak to you, and what's the best way to get in contact so you can help them?
Yeah, so probably the best way is either through LinkedIn. So just do a search for iThink 365, or the website www.iThink365.co.uk, or speak to you, to be honest, and then you can make an introduction and we can have a chat.
Perfect.
Thanks so much for your time.
No problem. Just before you go, one more question. Closing tradition for me is to ask each guest about one piece of tech or software or an app that I think they couldn't live without nowadays.
Yep.
So I wondered what yours would be.
I could be really boring and say like Microsoft Teams, but I won't. So to be honest, the thing that I love music, and it's the Sonos. I just love the Sonos. So we've got Sonos is littered all over the house, and I love pushing my music on my kids and educating them. So that's my thing.
I think we've got it at home, and when I first got it, I wasn't quite sure, but I think once you've used it, it's so seamless and easy to use that you end up buying more, and then you have every room and zones set up in the end. So,
and I just love parties, and then just getting everyone just to add songs into a playlist, and then just seeing what people are listening to. It's fab.
Collaboration again, isn't it? I guess.
Yeah, that's it.
Perfect. All right, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Jamie, for inviting us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and good luck with with the Power Platform journey to the listeners.
Thank you very much. That's all for this episode of the Tech Remedy podcast. I hope you found it insightful and have some useful takeaways for your business. Please don't forget to share the podcast with anybody else it may help, and subscribe for future episodes to come.